Okay, so sorry for yeah, and so I would like to welcome all of you to our which session is this? Is the third session, to our third session of this Semiosalong series on the semiotics of space. So as you have noticed, this time we had some small organizational things, and we have 3 presenters for today also. So we had 3 presenters last time, and today we will have also 3 presenters, but for our last session, we will go back to our usual format of only 2 presenters. But yeah, so today we will have as our first speaker, Daria Arkhipova. I hope I'm pronouncing it right. And she's a very good friend from Tartu. Well, she's doing a PhD, joint degree with Tartu and Turin. She's now in the Netherlands, and her research focuses on artificial intelligence recommendation used on digital platforms, especially in social media, and how this influence human user decision-making processes. So her talk will be, it is titled A Biosemiotic Perspective on the Built Environment and its Representations in Social Media. And yeah, without further ado, I will give the floor to you, Daria. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Israel. I hope you hear me well. And I'm really grateful for this opportunity to talk about our article and also present a little bit of my PhD research. I live in part of Semiosalong since many years, but it's the first time I'm invited, and I have a very exciting feeling. And as 30 minutes are not that many, so I would try not to be very vague, and would start with my presentation. So you probably can see my presentation now, so I will also put it in the presentation mode. Okay, now I think you should be seeing it well.
Yes, yes, it works.
So today I will be talking about built environment, which is a bit unusual for me. But since this series of Semiosalong is dedicated to our dear friend Pierre Pellegrino, it's my honor to talk about built environment, even though in this article I was researching more on the part of social media. The title of my presentation today is corresponding to the article which we published with Federico Bellintani in, oh, sorry, it seems I did draw something in presentation. Erased. Okay. So this article is in free access on biosemiotics on the Springer website, and it's titled Built Environment in Social Media Towards a Biosemiotic Approach. Probably for some experts in every part of this title, so whether expert in built environment or social media studies or even biosemiotics, all the 3 parts seems to be not very working with each other. However, in our common work, we try to approach this topic with sort of innovative perspective, trying to add bit by bit every expertise opinion which we had in our possession, and also bring our own expertise point of view to the topic. So biosemiotics and work in semiotics in general can be very lonely. So most of my colleagues also at University of Turin very often state that doing a PhD or research in general, it's a very lonely process, and you need a lot of, you miss a lot of communication in it. And I would definitely agree. However, it's not when you're writing an article, co-authored article with someone. And I guess also for all my fellow colleagues, I could say that it can be a very interesting experience. So during this presentation, we will talk about how built environment relate to social media in general, what are digital environments and what they represent for their users. And also we would be talking about biosemiotics as a tool for holistic perspective. Maybe you can give me a hint, how can I erase this piece of drawing on my screen, if you see this red ink as well?
We see it, but it's not that disturbing, and we don't know how to.
Okay. Okay, then we will just continue with a beautiful drawing. So our main goal in this article was to show how social media as a part of our daily interactions can influence our perception of the built environment, and in general how it can influence built environment itself, meaning not digital representation of it, but the physical. And obviously article is in free access, so you can all read it. So I would not be repeating today everything what is written there, but rather I would talk about other aspects which may be curious and grow from the main body of text. So when we're talking about the tools through which semiotics studies different phenomena, it can be certain objects, texts, or altogether combined with behaviors, they represent a possibility to analyze environment in which phenomena is elaborating. And one of our first tasks was to overcome the opposition between nature and culture. And obviously this opposition is very much present in many branch of semiotic studies. Especially we point out the part of the structuralist perspective, which in general very much points out nature versus culture as the opposition between chaos and order, where nature represents the chaotic structures, and culture is there to organize and give more structured perspective, give understanding of some considered unpredictably in the nature processes. However, in our research, we highlight the fact that organisms are not created within the culture. They are part of nature, and they also dwell in the environment as they would be doing in nature, even though if it changed within different cultural paradigm. And to help us with this approach, we have also Kali Vikul. Okay. Perspective, which defines that there is not one but several types of nature. So zero nature as it is present in the wildness, first nature, which is a natural environment in which humans live, or environment in general. Second nature is the nature which is created by humans, so materiality, and built environment would be definitely belonging to this one, and third nature, which consists virtual and abstract representations and science world of meaning, to which we would also add digital representations, which are part of the social media environment. So in this extent, we wanted to point out that built environment, even though it's considered very often separated from the nature and considered to be mainly human-made with certain objectives and perspectives, it is rather an environment in ecosemiotic terms, so the space within which human dwell as any other being. So when we are talking about the environment, we wanted to point out that the oppositions which are previously highlighted in a different research, such as life, nature, and text in respect to semiosis, city, and practice, are not actually the opposition, but rather complementary categories. And in this extent, we did see that semiosis is actually one of the tools which is to explain the processes of life which may be considered in a certain way chaotic or unpredictable. And in the discussion between nature and city, we wanted to underline that there is no opposition or borderline which has to be crossed in order to understand it. When in the term of text and practices, we definitely did not come together with the structuralist perspective, which is very commonly used, and highlight that even though text gives a very organized way and perspective to the phenomena, the practices is one of the unavoidable processes which are present in the organism interaction with the environment. And here I would like to give you a little perspective on the process of how organisms Umwelt is interacting with environment, and I definitely don't need to explain famous Uxkolial functional circle, because you know it even without me. But I would rather underline that Umwelt as a category, as a phenomenon, which we can identify through all the living creatures, but also in humans, is very unique and give us very own perspective of the environment in which we are living. This way, built environment in respect to the human is the attempt to change the given environment towards the needs of our own Umwelt. And in this respect, the built environment has a lot to do with actually digital environments, because we can perceive the world around us mainly based on the perceptual organs, which means that we do not possess the tools to see environment the way bats do it, for example. For us, New York or Tartu is a beautiful city made of buildings which are done of wood or rocks. But for a bat, it's a completely different environment, probably of the structures which can be used as a houses, but also otherwise prevented from successful hunting, for example. And for every organism and probably also for every human, the perception of the environment can differ. So when we would think about the process of interaction within the environment, we would consider as a first step of this interaction, the perception and possibly recognition. Perception can be divided into the process which consists of the cause, but also of the identification of the objects or tools which can be used according to our own needs. And the recognition process is happening based on the categories through which we operate as the organism or as a humans, for example. Unrecognized information become a noise. So we can see that even though Tartu is a beautiful place for many humans, for bats or dogs, it consists a lot of noise which do not represent the objects of environment as they would be meaningful. And then based on the Umwelt and its capacities and also the given temporal perspective, we can talk about the interpretation, which can be unconscious as the reaction on the stimulation from the environment or otherwise conscious. And there we can talk already about the transformation of this reaction to the practices, social values, and to cultural level. When we would talk about social media as the environment, we would be talking about the agency of agency which is present within social media in respect to the built environment. And one of the tools which are used on social media in order to modify communication among agents is AI recommendations. It's one of the tools which also manage the possibility of users to encounter certain information and find their own affordances towards their own needs. And here we can see that the interaction between human and the built environment or human and social media is structurally very similar, and it is very much connected to the fact that our recognition process remains the same even when we change our environments. This way, also encountering various representations of real objects which can be considered meaningful to us as a users through our own Umwelt, we may create certain reactions to them, which can be transformed into practices and later social values go on to the cultural level. So here's finally a theoretical part starts, so we can talk about the fun part of our paper. So to give a support to our theoretical ideas, we did digital ethnography. So we collected various representations of digital environments and in order to analyze the practices which were created by users. And this work basically dual way, because users recognize the representations of the built environment on social media, and later repeat them in their physical practices when they are going to some physical spaces. As for example, you can see at this building, at this slide, first post represents Matera city in Italy, second represent the building in Milan, and the third one represent Bosco Verticale, socio-cultural construction in Milan, which represent a living building, but also a garden, which is vertical. And in our understanding of interplay between built environment and social media, we find out that people keen to assign physical places with the meanings they bring from social media. This way, these three examples actually are quite important because they not only support this interplay between social media and built environment, but also represent how nature and culture is actually complementary and not opposition to each other. The city of Matera is very interesting case because before almost 1950, which points basically only 70 years back in time, citizens of Matera used to live in their old town, which was surrounded by series of caves, and this place used to be quite isolated. That's why they were managed to preserve this environment in the way it was constructed basically almost 2000 years ago till nowadays. The interesting part of the city is that it's built on the landscape, given landscape of the environment. And most of the buildings, if you would go on site, would consist inside cave, which would be used as a cellar or place where to store any goods or even keep animals. And the case of Bosco Verticale, it's a social cultural project which aims to transform a city back to the nature, which means that every building should perform a function, not only living environment, but also the function of land, which would give possibility for plants to grow and also to make our living more ecological. So to say, this project is mainly realized only in 2 cities, in Milan and Hong Kong, but the company which operates with this project plans to create more locations. Another interesting category is urban parks, which brings people to practices which they would be normally expressing into the wild or more natural environment rather than within the city. And indeed, it creates even certain threshold between the practices which are supposed to be performed within the park, as for example, this open air yoga and all other sport activities, which also used somehow by social media users to point out their own identity within these physical spaces, but also within their digital representations. Another interesting practice which we encounter was related to urban gardening. Sorry. In this extent, there is even some particular criteria which to which the representation should correspond. So you do not show your a little plant, if it's only 2 centimeters, and call yourself urban gardener, even though I bet all of us have one. It is also brings certain values to the center of the operational semiosphere in order to highlight the need and importance of this type of practices. Obviously, most of the posts which we analyzed did consist of image of the person responsible for the creation of the agricultural landscape, but also we notice that they often use photos of the children as to point out that it is the future direction of our living. Another interesting aspect is digital environmentalism. It is also very interesting that many environmentalists sharing their actions through social media look for the recognition it as a part of their digital identity and their identity in general, which means that sometimes it appears to be more valuable to share online about your pro-environmental actions rather than actually just calmly fulfill your beliefs and consider this as to say, just a duty. Actually, this aspect can be seen also within many different phenomena, not only digital environmentalism. When people share on social media in order to get impact on their identity rather than actually making a physical change, which means that in the merge of digital environmentalism and built environment, doing digital environmentalism become more important than actually physical impact. And one of the last categories we find out is ecotourism, which mainly relate to the change into the tourism in general, because by itself, tourism it's very beautiful, but it also can be very harmful phenomena. As for example, Venice in Italy, which receives around 25,000–40,000 tourists a day, receives significant impact and also ecological impact. When one of the solutions to this was proposed this practice on social media, which also received quite high recognition in visiting and promoting this kind of bamboo-built structure as a hotels at Bali. And this way, people who go to this kind of resorts in order to make picture and later to post it on social media to confirm the fact how environment friendly they are, is actually making more digital impact than physical. However, many start to follow their example, going to the same locations and choosing the same type of eco-friendly constructions. So when we are talking about sorry, I just see that other people can draw on it as well. So it is a bit, it's first time I experience this kind of drawing online. So But if you feel like drawing something, feel free to draw anything. So I wanted to talk a bit about part of my own research, which is not part of the article, which I just was talking about. And it's mainly related to artificial intelligence as a tool to organize and like functioning tool of social media. And obviously, artificial intelligence plays significant impact when we're talking about the practices which are transmit from physical world into the digital one and back. Because as we know from the studies of Juri Lotman, translation process and movement of the values from center to periphery and back is based on the fact that semiosphere is sorry, I lost my word. So semiosphere has the translation process as in order of okay, let's leave it. So social media are created to resemble semiosphere. However, they don't have this mechanism of self-regulating. And in this way, artificial intelligence plays this role, assigning the value to elements which are within this system. When we're talking about user as an agent within this system, we can think about the fact that as within the environments, the same ways on the digital environments, users find the affordances which help into their self-articulation, which mainly relates to the what users, people see on social media in self-monitoring, self-identification, and self-presentation, which we did see through the images which I showed you previously. But also it has self-enhancing capacity. So giving a possibility to adjust own identity through the image. And the same way also the representations of built environment can be enhanced on social media and modified. And obviously all these parts of affordances are important when we're talking about learning and scaffolding process. So nowadays, most of the users of social media, which are fortunately or unfortunately many, have to basically balance between several environments, one of which is physical and another one is digital. And this process definitely requires they not only to perceive and recognize the objects within both environments, but also act accordingly. And in this way, we can talk about dual process, which encounter not only social media and built environment, but also AI agent as the one of the participants of this process. And in this part, I would not be talking about what effects it has on the human body and human Umwelt. In this respect, we will be just focusing on the environment itself. So when we're talking about the interpretation of built and digital environments, it is very curious to point out that digital environments unfortunately do not possess all the tools for interpretation. And when we are talking about the translation from built environment to digital representation to digital environments or social media, for example, then we can see that based on the Walsner theoretical explanation of how the interpretations happening within time, most of the interpretations may come to the lower level of semiosis, which means reflection on verbalizable categories and verbalizable generalization, which means that majority of users are keen to adopt the categories which are created by the algorithm, which means that within time, most users tend to have similar or even identical practices which are applied to the physical environments, but mainly spreads through the digital representations. So I think I will stop at this moment, and we will leave the rest to the question if I have any time.
Thank you, Daria. And yeah, we have time for some brief questions. So yeah, do we have questions here, or I mean here in the room, or here in Zoom? So we have one question here. Always.
Ask her about the first nature, second nature distinction that Galevi introduces. Ask her to say again something about this distinction, first nature, second nature.
So Tyler is asking whether you can come back to the Galevi's distinction between first, second, third nature.
May I also add something to that?
Yes.
I was curious because I'm not really familiar with the concept. If they are subsets of each other, or if they are separate, like completely separate, if they don't interact. All right.
You are muted. Yes.
Sorry, I completely unlearned how to use Zoom during these days.
That's okay.
Or how to present in Zoom, basically. So actually, these categories proposed by Galevi, I found them very useful, in particularly in my research, because obviously I'm not researching on the built environment, and built environment is not part of my deep interest. However, I'm researching on social media environments, which hardly well described in the semiotic field, which means that we are talking about something which doesn't have a physical presence and which is mainly based on the digital representations of the objects which have physical body. In this extent, this explanation of different natures proposed by Galevi related to the zero nature as a nature in the wild, and first nature as this zero nature basically perceived by organisms or humans in this extent. But obviously my own interest is rather in the third nature, which basically based on the virtual and abstract representations of nature. And I would put digital representations and digital environments here as well, because even though they as Galevi rightly points out, virtual and abstract, they are very physical in the impact they do on us as the users. like obviously today my presentation is not based on the my findings about the impact rather on the environment itself, but it is very curious how our perception on the environments influence our own interaction with this environment.
Nice. I was just glad to see somebody endorsing this system of types of nature, which Kalev has proposed, because you mentioned deconstructing oppositions. Obviously, nature, culture being one of these most famous binary oppositions. Another important one being mind, body, etc. And so
Yes.
deconstruction of these dualisms is crucial in semiotics. On the other hand, we have to push back against the total rejection of such dualisms. So we accept, of course, that there's such a thing as outside and inside, but we understand at the same time that inside is often confused for outside and vice versa. Nature is often confused for culture, and thus we need to multiply the distinctions, but not throw out the most basic ones. So I was glad to see that you fastened onto that bit of theory. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I also think that it's very important, and it's somehow controversial also. I was thinking about it during my last meditation, like while I'm meditating, I'm thinking about semiotics. Probably it's already next level of craziness. But I thought that in general life or nature, so to say, it's unlimited, it's chaotic, and it is like that. But we cannot understand unlimited and chaotic things. Our brain perceive it as unpredictability, which brings us anxiety and stress, and we cannot live in this kind of environment. So we need to organize things to make them understandable and therefore limited. That's why we, for example, come up with binary opposition, where things are limited and predictable, so we can act within them, we can organize them, and we can make ourselves in peace with them, so to say. But even though we may like this understanding at some point, it doesn't mean that everything indeed is in black and white. So I think it's like two different things which may be perceived as opposite, but still they are perfectly coexisting in our life. And
I'm thinking the problem of this binary opposition in my field in anthropology is constantly discussed extremely deeply. And I think the solution is not just to get rid of these oppositions, just to translate them into functional considerations rather than ontological categories, or something that we treat almost as ontological categories. Because these binarities, outside, inside, mind, body, nature, and so on, they are there because they are very practical for application in our existence. But that the idea was lost when we started treating them as ontological things. So I think that the thing isn't overcoming these oppositions, just translating them into slightly different language, slightly different contexts for the pragmatic application of what that means. Because outside means a place where we act specifically in a different way than we act from inside. And there's something called liminal space, which is extremely interesting, that this reveals the binarity. So just treat them as a purely, pragmatical form of existence. It's related to the behavioral side of our existence. And once this line might be done, maybe we can, move beyond the endless conflict about how to treat them.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I also would add to that I think it's just like binary opposition is a tool which we may or may not use. And as for example, we may call some, like, for example, if we would talk about higher outcome in the algorithm, if we talk from the point of view of ICT, we would say that it is category. So algorithm works in order to create a category of something. But then if we would talk about this something representing within culture, we would say that it is a cultural volume, or for example, isotopy in terms of Umberto Eco, or it is the center of the semiosphere in the terms of Lotman. Like, to me, all these things can completely coexist together in one piece of understanding. It doesn't mean that we have to get rid of binary opposition, or we have to say that there is only binary opposition, because there are somehow both at the same time.
Yeah, thank you very much. And yeah, this discussion is extremely interesting and very relevant. I would like to continue because binary opposition is a topic very dear to me as a linguist semiotician. But well, we have to move on because we're kind of running out of time. But Daria, again, thank you very much. And
Thank you a lot.
yes, so now if you could